Hi everyone, Purple Planet Media here. This is going to be a test for a possible idea of making an audio series of my short stories. Today I'm going to be taking a snippet from Ignition Reborn Loss. Specifically, I'm going to be reading Chapter 3. So this might contain some minor spoilers, so if you haven't read it yet, I recommend you do. Other than that, you can pull up and read the short story as I'm reading on purpleplanetmedia.weebly.com. Without further ado, let's get this started. Chapter 3. It happened nearly instantaneously. Bruticus gunships came soaring over the residential sector. Even with the squads of Holy Guardsmen opening fire in the sky, the gunships started to bombard both guardsmen and civilians, easily killing rows of people as lasers and gunfire rained down. One of the guardsmen, Ick, a Gwarian, took a heavy laser to the chest and crashed onto the hard concrete floor. "Spread out!" Second Deacon Tross shouted, knowing one of his guardsmen was dead. A shot like that would kill any soldier instantly. Javis ran towards an abandoned hovercar. Lex in his hands, he watched the crowds of people panic and start to sprint. Some squads stayed with the people, trying to reorganize the people while others tried to provide covering fire. Looking around, he saw the other two squads stayed behind as well. One of them took cover behind another set of vehicles beside his squad, while others took cover in one of the nearby homes. "Gunships are deploying troops on the streets! Hold them back, guardsmen!" Second Deacon Tross shouted, looking over the hover truck he was hiding behind to fire his laser rifle. As other guardsmen followed, Javis also lifted up his rifle and turned to face the enemy. Several Bruticus fire teams moved out onto the street as they exited the gunships, firing their assault rifles. Bullets and lasers flew past Javis as he used his HUD's assistant to aim for his targets. Going for the closest ones, he flicked the switch on his Lex to put the rifle on 3-round bursts before pulling the trigger. Firing lasers at the pair of Bruticus soldiers making a run for a nearby hovercar, the first wave of lasers smashed right into one of the soldiers' face, sending his body tumbling on the ground. At a moment's notice, Javis pulled the trigger again, bringing down a second soldier before the others took cover behind an energy barrier their fire team leader deployed. To his right, he saw most of the other squads of guardsmen were being overwhelmed as 3 fire teams of Bruticus soldiers pushed forward, firing their rifles to shoot down any of the guardsmen that tried to fire back. Seeing only 2 left, Javis knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to assist. Going to a crouch to use the hovercar as cover from incoming fire, Javis pulled his Lex up, his HUD immediately assisting his aim before putting the weapon on full auto. Then he fired. Holding the trigger down, he sent a shower of lasers towards the soldiers. With most of his lasers missing, Javis managed to gun one of the soldiers down while suppressing the others, to which they shouted and ran for cover wherever they could. Others began to fire in his direction, forcing Javis to move back into the hovercar to avoid the spray of bullets. Being forced to stay in cover, Javis had no idea if the other 2 guardsmen managed to survive. Hands clutched on his rifle, he moved up a little as the firing slowed. Javis was relieved to see the other guardsmen were alive, even helping him this time as they both shot their rifles at the soldiers, shooting down most of them before falling back. Keeping his back along with the hovercar, Javis peeked around to fire at 2 additional fire teams charging the streets. A couple of soldiers dropped from the incoming lasers. Hearing a hiss escape his rifle, Javis moved back behind the hovercar before reloading, allowing the dead power cell to land on the ground before placing a fresh one in. A Bruticus soldier then rushed around the hovercar and lunged into Javis, smashing his back into the hovercar's door. Being met with an immediate punch across his face, a sudden pang of pain rushed along his face. Quickly looking back at the soldier, Javis jerked his elbow to slam into the soldier's helmet. Using the power in his Lycoid legs, he shoved the soldier off. Stumbling back, the soldier must have noticed he lost his advantage as he wildly swung his fist at Javis. One of the blows smashed into Javis' face, which swung back from the strike. However, before the soldier can get another swing in, Javis growled, dodging the soldier's fist before slamming his knee into the soldier's gut. With a sputter, the soldier used a hand to grab his lightly armored belly. Taking the advantage he had, Javis kicked the soldier to the ground before pulling out his sidearm to finish the fight with 2 bullets in the chest. "Fall back!" Tross shouted. Javis spotted others running away. Some were still firing, but others were in a full sprint. Then he felt a very heavy thump, nearly knocking him off his feet, if it wasn't for his species' excellency in balance. Standing up as quick as he could, he spotted a Bruticus Cyclops, a massive 4-story, 2-legged mech. having no arms but a massive eye as a laser cannon. Stomping closer with its giant, wide feet, the Cyclops began to charge up its weapon. Eyes widening, Jarvis turned around and began to run at full speed. The Cyclops' weapons whined as they were nearly charged. Looking around, Jarvis desperately tried to find somewhere to duck for concealment. If he stayed on the streets for much longer, he'd be a dead man. Without looking back, he darted to the left. Then, he heard the Cyclops fire its weapon. Jarvis heard the enormous laser smash into the concrete before sliding up behind him and the other guardsmen. Heat was getting closer to his back as the lasers swept across the street. A few of the Borean guardsmen climbed over the houses while others ran. Jumping, Jarvis lunged through a house's front window, covering his face as the body smashed into glass. Looking back, Jarvis watched in horror as the Cyclops tore through his squad. Screams from the crowd increased as Jarvis saw none of the other guardsmen still standing. "No," Jarvis whispered fearfully. Shocked, he just stared at the large scorch mark where his fellow guardsmen stood. His voice quivered while his mind raced through what just happened. "Check the houses for survivors. We can't risk any heretics' escape," a voice shouted, one of their squad leaders. Jarvis perked up his ears the moment he heard one of the doors of a distant house get kicked open. Stepping back, Jarvis swallowed down hard as he watched the Cyclops stomp in the direction of the fleeing crowd. Other groups of Bruticus soldiers rushed beside the towering mech. Slowly getting to a crouch, he picked up his Lex. "Hey!" a voice shouted in a hushed whisper. Hearing the voice coming from behind, his training soon kicked in as he swiftly turned with his weapon raised. "Whoa!" a human said, shakily raising up his arms. The second Jarvis recognized he was Serenity's civilian, he sighed and lowered his weapon. The human was standing on the second floor, looking terrified as he stared at Jarvis. Jarvis motioned him to come down, placing a finger on his lips. After a couple of seconds, the human entered what seemed to be the living area. Jarvis, however, was hidden behind the couch. When the human saw Jarvis wave him over, he scrambled to hide beside the guardsman. "What are you doing here?" Jarvis whispered, perking an ear to listen for Bruticus soldiers. I ran in here the moment the shooting started," the human replied. Jarvis didn't exactly blame him. He did the exact same when that Cyclops dropped in. Part of Jarvis hoped the Templar was still alive and fighting, even if some Bruticus forces broke through. "Alright, fair enough," Jarvis said, peeking his head over the couch a little after hearing another door getting kicked down. There was a handful of screams that were quickly ended with gunfire. The human whimpered softly. Crouching back down, Jarvis turned to the human as he pulled out his standard pistol. "You ever use a gun before?" Jarvis whispered. Unsurprisingly, the human shook his head, since Serenity is practically completely against violence other than purely for protection. "Here's the simple version," Jarvis began, placing the weapon in the human's shaky hands. "It's on safety, for now, meaning you can't fully pull the trigger." Jarvis then placed the human's finger on the switch. "You press this to turn the safety off, then aim, with both hands, and fire." Jarvis watched the nervous human stare at the weapon in his hands. His eyes showed the mental battle going through his head. "I understand. If trouble comes and you can't force yourself to kill, then hide. But keep the weapon. At the very least, it'll give me peace of mind. Understand?" Jarvis asked. The human looked up and nodded. What's your name?" he asked. "Jarvis." "Well, it's nice to meet you, Jarvis. I'm Paul." Another door was taken down. Laser fire was heard alongside the gunfire this time. Either a civilian managed to take a Lex, or one of the other guardsmen survived. However, that soon didn't matter as the laser fire quickly died down. Standing up slowly, Jarvis motioned Paul to stand. "We need to leave. It'll only be a matter of time before they search this home too," Jarvis ordered. Though terrified, Paul managed to force himself to get up, sticking close to Jarvis as he kept the pistol in both his hands. Where are we going to go?" he whispered as additional gunfire was heard in the distance. "The spaceport. That's our only chance of surviving," Jarvis replied, leading the two towards the rear entrance. "How far is that?" 20 minutes tops." Getting beside the door, Jarvis perked up his ears, trying to listen for potential hostiles on the other end. Hearing nothing, Jarvis sighed as he clutched his rifle in one hand and took hold of the door handle in the other. Opening the door, Jarvis looked around. He spotted additional gunships flying in the distance. Thankfully, not in the direction of the spaceport. However, seeing gunships moving was still a very bad sign. Turning back, he saw Paul leaning onto the wall beside him, his pistol tight in both of his hands as he watched the living room. "Good. How is it out there? He asked, keeping his eyes on the living room. Clear for now, though I expect plenty of Bruticus soldiers to be running around, so be careful. Paul nodded after swallowing. Alright, follow me, Javis ordered, slowly opening the door all the way. Leaving the house, Javis immediately dashed for the backyard exit. Paul followed the moment Javis picked up speed. Though a little slow, he soon stopped beside the light koi, awaiting his next move. Javis quickly unlocked the fence gate and opened the door. Both Paul and Javis looked back when they heard the front door of the house burst open. Without warning, Javis grabbed Paul's hand and forced him to leave first. Move. Find cover. I'll be right behind you. Paul didn't dare to argue before making a run for it. Hearing Bruticus soldiers storm the house they were hiding in, Javis moved around the gate. He spotted Paul sitting in a parked hovercar, searching for something. Checking his surroundings, Javis moved towards Paul, who noticed him as he unlocked the hovercar. Opening the door, Javis took a seat before quietly closing it behind him. This wasn't what I had in mind when I said cover, Javis said, watching Paul search in the vehicle. I know, but there are soldiers everywhere, and if we get spotted on foot, we're dead, Paul replied. And being exposed in a hovercar is better? Javis asked, raising a brow. I mean, yeah, Paul said with a shrug. Javis shook his head. This is insane, but, he thought as he looked out the window, I see what the human is thinking. Alright, you drive and you don't stop. I'll be ready the moment the shooting starts. Alright, and this is the end of Chapter 3 of Ignition Reborn Lost. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And again, if this is your first time hearing or reading the short story, I recommend you finish it from start to finish, and I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Other than that, this is Purple Planet Media, signing off.